Well, we're back at Newcastle United's media centre after Eddie Howe's press conference ahead of the Wolves game, and there's plenty to get through here today, but you know, the big one, the two huge headlines that have just emerged from Eddie Howe's press conference are absolutely the fact that just a few games into the season, Newcastle already hamstrung by some injury difficulties, and Yohan Wissa, who only arrived at the training ground after international duty with Congo yesterday, has reported with a knee injury and has been immediately sent to a specialist to determine how long he's going to be missing for. Eddie Howe unable to clarify that, but a huge blow for Newcastle. The new number 9 coming in and won't be able to face Wolves this weekend. Whether it's going to be a long layoff, we'll have to wait and see, but that is probably the top headline to come from today's press conference. Secondly, Jacob Ramsey, who we already knew that he had a whack on his ankle after the Leeds game, but he is also going to be missing for a month. Won't be back until after the next international break. So two huge blows there. The Ramsey one, not so much a surprise given he was injured against Leeds and came off at half time, but Wissa injured against Senegal this week. Very difficult for him to get his head around this one. I think it's going to be a huge blow for Newcastle going to the Wolves game. But the good news, Nick Woltemade is in line to make his debut against Wolverhampton Wanderers at St James's Park. He's fine, he's trained, he's had the benefit of a few sessions with the players now, and behind me they're already preparing for that game against Wolves, and Woltemade will be looking to get off to a flying start. It's on his shoulders in some ways to try and, you know, end this sort of goal drought Newcastle have had in 2 of the first 3 games. But I think really the German international will be up for this. Seems like he's really settling in around the town. There's a lot of pictures of him in supermarkets on the quayside. Looks like he's really embracing this, so hopefully that is going to be a good sign moving forward. Newcastle against Wolves. Wolves rock bottom. Newcastle also looking to get their first win, but they do have 2 points and 2 clean sheets on the board. Any type of win will do Newcastle in this one. Even if they scrape it, they just need to get off and running. And Barcelona, don't forget, in town a few days later at St James's Park. So really exciting times for Newcastle. But first up, it's that game against Wolves. Well, it wouldn't have been a press conference without Eddie Howe being asked about Alexander Isak, but hopefully this is probably going to be the last time, you'd like to think anyway, that Eddie Howe is asked about Isak. And yeah, he was very candid in there. He said that, you know, he admitted the relationship completely broke down after Isak refused to play. Used the term on strike for the first time, which was, you know, turned a lot of heads. But at the end of the day, you know, people knew Isak refused to play. Now that has been clarified. It's been confirmed by Eddie Howe. Obviously the saga stretches back to July when he wouldn't play against Celtic, then he wouldn't go on pre-season, then he wouldn't play in the Premier League, and he was just holding out for that move to Liverpool, which in the end he got. And Newcastle fans will be they'll be looking to move on, but I think really to hear it from Eddie Howe, how disappointed he was, how the communication broke down, how the relationship broke down for a player who Newcastle brought over here as a 63 million signing from Real Sociedad, gave him the platform to push on. And I think the fact that he refused to play is obviously something that let Eddie Howe down. So yeah, that was his views on Isak. Other sort of sidelines from the press conference, Eddie Howe talking about the arrival of David Hopkinson as CEO, said it's a positive. Was asked about the lack of a director of football, was even asked if he didn't like working with directors of football, something which he quickly shot down and said, you know, that is not the situation. He's, you know, eager for somebody to come in and fill the shoes of Paul Mitchell, who left way back in May. So Eddie Howe has been battling away with transfers ever since. So yeah, really interesting press conference. That game against Wolves kicks off at 3 p.m. tomorrow at St James's Park. We'll be bringing you all the coverage from that in the build-up. From the players arriving to the teams walking down the tunnel. Newcastle United coverage will be covered fully on Chronicle Live, so yeah, please join us for that. And any comments, any questions, we would love to see them. If they're not answered straight away, they'll be answered in various Q&As. So please drop them in. Drop me your predictions in for the game against Wolves. So what will that mean in terms of team news? Well, you have to look at it and say it's over to Nick Valtemere to make a huge impact on his debut if possible. Although, as I said earlier in the week, as long as Newcastle win this game, it doesn't matter if he, gets off to a flying start in terms of goals or assists or whatever. As long as Newcastle win, really, that is the situation the team find themselves in. It's a huge blow to not have Johan Visser for this game. And yeah, it's one of them things that can happen on international duty. It just happens to have unfolded for Newcastle United this week. And the Jacob Ramsey situation as well just compounds that as well. So, a couple of pre-season signings there not available for Newcastle, and that is always going to be difficult to move on from. But the stage is set for Valtemere against Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think everyone's going to be right behind the team from the off, and we're going to see St James's Park fired up after a good absence of games, 3 weeks since that Liverpool match, and it's now time to get back on with business, which Eddie Howe spoke to me about as well in his press conference, basically saying this is the chance to turn the page now on the season, on the whole Isak saga. It's an opportunity to move on to the next episode. For me, that has been badly needed. I was with the team over in South Korea and Singapore, and it was lingering around the squad. It was affecting the mood a little bit. I know Newcastle got 2 points on the board, but they can now finally move on from it. They've got closure from the Isak situation, and I think that was always going to be very important. The game itself against Wolves, they're rock bottom. They've had a good win in the cup against West Ham, but Premier League, they are not off the mark yet. So it couldn't be a better game really for Newcastle, you'd like to think. And they just need to get off to a flying start in this match. In some ways, Eddie Howe is just glad to kind of be back to work. He was a little bit dejected about the injury situation, but he looked like he was happy just to be getting back in the dugout and facing Wolves on Saturday this weekend. It's been a long gap since that 0-0 draw against Leeds. You go back to that game and Newcastle, they weren't at their best, but they weren't at the worst either. They got a good clean sheet. Wolves will offer probably a little bit more threat than Leeds, in my opinion, but we'll see what happens. Newcastle at least have those 2 clean sheets in the bag, so they've got good foundations to build off. But yeah, ultimately for Newcastle now, they move into this game. If they can get the win on the board, it sets them up perfectly for that game against Barcelona. So let's hope we can see a big performance this weekend against Wolves.